Welcome to Diaspora, the show where we share the remarkable stories of immigrants from the Indian subcontinent. I'm your host, Aditya Mehta. Each week, we sit down with individuals who have made the journey over and explore their experiences, their challenges, their triumphs. We delve into their unique perspectives on adapting to a new culture while staying connected to their roots. Today, we are joined by Hiloni Sheth. She's a product manager and a digital marketing entrepreneur. She's originally from Mumbai, and this is her second stint in the US. A very interesting thing about her is that she and her husband, Prerak, spent a year living in several different cities across the US before settling down in Seattle. I will go into that a little bit later in the show. I know Hiloni in a manner that might seem strange to most Americans, but is common in high context cultures like India. She is my in-laws, former neighbor's son's wife, so very close. And now the former neighbors are neighbors again, and I've got to know her husband pretty well over the years as well. So with that, let's dive into this week's conversation. And Hiloni, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thank you so much. And just to add context, I think my mom-in-law and your mom-in-law are like best friends. I think that kind of makes it closer for sure.
That makes it closer too. The building that they live in is like a mini city by itself, and everybody has all these close friends who hang out at each other's houses. It's like we did as kids, but they're doing as senior citizens.
Oh my God, I agree. I think when I got married, I think my fear was I would always have to be like decently presentable when I take the elevator because I'm bound to meet someone they know. And it's bound to have like additional 10 minutes of my time going into a conversation with them before I get to what I'm on to.
I don't go there as often, but I think I also have the same worry because I'll run into one of their friends. But so you grew up in Mumbai or Bombay. What do you prefer calling it?
Good question. I think Mumbai is something that comes more easy, but Bombay feels like the one we grew up in.
I only say Mumbai when I speak Marathi usually. Otherwise, it's Bombay. Usually, I ask my guests to compare the city they're from with a city in the US. But Bombay being a big and well-known city compared to New York and LA most of the time, the basis is usually because it's the financial capital and one of the major film industries of India, not the only one. Is there anything else that you think lends that more flavor to that comparison?
Totally. I feel so both these cities, I feel the bigger vibe is the people and the kind of people, the background they are from. I think it's the hustle culture that's ingrained with the dreaminess of getting somewhere someday. And I think that sense of just the vibe that you get in the city is very comparable to New York. One of the interesting things I've been like, I have a bunch of colleagues both from New York, LA, and back when I used to live in Bombay. You always feel like you are in the best place on earth. And there's nothing better than that till you actually go out and maybe see more stuff. So that's the feeling I think people have in those cities. Like you have everything at your disposal and it's all about what you choose to do and how you want to do it. I think, just the diversity, the choices and the options makes it a very lovely place to be in.
India is a place where due to the caste system, there was not enough social mobility early. And Bombay has always been a place where anyone can come and become well off or rich or create generational wealth. And it's always been like that from the start. And now I think there are other places in India where you could probably do that. But I think Bombay is definitely special in that aspect. And also, I agree with what you said. People in Bombay don't know anything about what happens in the rest of the country. So once you cross the city limit, it's like rest of India.
Yeah.
And I used to travel a lot for my family business and I would visit all these small towns all around the country. And it was really eye-opening as to what happens in the rest of the country outside of the little bubble that Bombay is. One unique thing about Bombay, no matter where you live in the city, everyone south of you is a spoiled brat and everybody north of you is like a wannabe.
I would not agree. I come from the northern part.
So for you, someone from Virar is a wannabe and someone from Bandra is a spoiled brat. So I grew up in the suburb of Borivali till I was 6. You're from there. My wife's from there. Your husband's from there. Tell us about Borivali as a place. What is it like?
Interesting. So if we had to put Borivali into context, I feel like it's a very big, high-functional family with a lot of people on different paths, but still eventually like somewhere their paths are crossing and they're colliding and building one ecosystem out of it. It feels very close from a culture perspective. I think at least the neighborhoods that I grew up were very similar to the kind of culture I came from. It holds a lot of that dreamy mindset because a lot of us, at least growing up, were maybe like second, third generation immigrants in Bombay. But we have always heard the rags to riches stories of like our grandparents or our parents. And that kind of puts us in that mindset that, okay, this is the place where you can get to
Yeah.
where you want.
It's a landing spot for Gujaratis moving from Gujarat to Bombay.
Yeah.
And as life progresses, people sometimes continue living there, buy bigger houses there, or they end up going out to South Bombay or Ghatkopar or the other Gujarati hubs. But have you noticed how Borivali West and East are completely different?
Yes, they are. I think the culture, I think West is very like Gujarati people, and it feels like you have always a sense of belonging. I think even if you're new or
Yeah.
you have been there forever, you will
Yeah.
find that sense of belonging. I've not been a lot to the east side or lived there, but yeah, it's different there. It's not
That's where I
warm.
grew up, and when I go back, some of it is still exactly the same, whereas
Mhm.
the West has been transformed. So, for more context for our listeners, most suburbs in Bombay have a east and a west side, and that's based on the railway track. So, the main commuter line, the Bombay local trains, they split most of these suburbs into an east and a west. And generally, the west is nicer, I would say, or busier, or there's more retail and more things going on than the east part of the suburb. But Borivali, as a suburb, has over 1 million people, and so that's the size of a large American city, not even. And then it's just a suburb. Maybe more about Borivali at some later point. What was it like growing up? Were you in a convent school or like a regular school or?
Yep, I think most classic Bombay kids were in a convent school. Your parents wanted you to be good at English for some
yeah.
reason. They would put you
Yeah.
in a convent school. So came from a convent school. Growing up, I was probably one of those good kids for tag. I used to be like very good at studies, would listen to parents, pursue different hobbies, and very cocooned upbringing where always protected, have good families, big families. So you have a good set of cousins to learn from, but at the same
Yeah.
time, they're as close as your friends. So your culture is very much defined by people around you. And
Yeah.
that's mostly what I grew up with.
Was your building like a Gujarati building?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a thing in India. Like a lot of neighborhoods are cosmopolitan, but a lot are very segregated in terms of the community or the language that's spoken. So my building, like non-vegetarian food is not allowed. And there was a funny story where Zomato, which is a food delivery app like DoorDash, they had a separate delivery team for the non-veg food, and they had red uniforms so that the veg people they have the solace that their food is being handled by someone who handles only vegetarian food. But then these red uniform people were going into all these vegetarian societies because people were secretly ordering non-veg food, and then they got busted and Zomato had to change the rule. But yeah, ours is Gujarati, Marwadis, mostly Jains, and it's pretty common and it's not looked at as like a bad thing. Like here is, it's not a diverse community, it's a segregated community. But I think Indians like to be within India, be among their type of people. So
yeah, it gives them a sense of comfort being
Yeah.
around, and it's easier to bond as well.
yeah, and I covered this in a previous episode where if it's like a university setting where there's only 50 Indians, they all get along. But if the Austin where I went to, there's 2,000 Indians, then the Gujaratis hang out separately and the Bombay people hang out separately. So it's ingrained into how we are as a people. So you went to DJ Sangvi, right?
Yes.
And that's where you met Prerak.
Yes.
So DJ Sangvi, for our listeners, has a really big alumni presence in the US too, right?
Yeah, like I remember 80% of my batch from my undergrad is right here in the US. So a lot of us actually move abroad and settle here. I feel like in any city that I go to, I will definitely someone I know from
Yeah.
DJ Sangvi and like meet up.
And if it's someone who you don't know, but they're just alums, does that still help?
Yeah, it still holds true. This happened to us. Like when I did that whole different city living on Instagram, I had like random people like alums reach out that, hey, we are in this city and because you're here, let's just meet up. And that was like nice, welcoming, warm,
Yeah.
pretty good.
You don't see that with a lot of colleges in India. Like maybe the IITs have that kind of alumni group or ISB does, but the average Joe college, like I went to HR college, that's not a thing where you would reach out to someone and say, hey, I'm also from HR college, so let's be friends or whatever. So that's pretty nice. What did you study there?
I did my information technology engineering, but I think I spent a lot more time organizing festivals, doing sponsorship, like getting people to buy stuff that we were selling. So that was something that I did a lot more while doing engineering. And I think that's probably also where I found like my real passion. I think that's a story for a lot of Desi kids, like you're overachieving, you get into science, you do engineering, and probably while doing that is when you really realize, okay, what's your calling, what do you really want to do?
Yeah.
And that was a very typical path that I had as well.
And these college festivals are a big deal. And it's a matter of pride for your college. And like when Xavier's would do the Malhar festival, like HR would send a 200-person contingent and they would all show up at the same time and try to intimidate. So in those days, those things were important and it was a big deal. I was part of these committees as well. My actually college organizing happened more at UT Austin, where I was the founder of the Longhorn Cricket Club. And when I left, it was probably one of the biggest cricket clubs in any university in the US. We had like 400 members.
Wow.
And we also won the Central Texas Cricket League. So it was quite a proud moment. But in India, I was more like just part of these committees, and those were fun times. And we were called the outstanding students of the college because we were always standing outside the classroom and not actually attending classes.
Oh yeah, I remember my parents had to come down because I had lack of attendance, and they would like
Yeah.
ask them to come down and inform them. And I'm like, my parents know, like they are aware of what I'm doing, but it would still be like that formality. But I think just coming back to your point, like why DJ Sangvi is so close, I feel one of the other parts to it is because we were so involved in these festivals, like you would know like all these people and they would be across years. It just doesn't have to be your cohort. And the amount of time we just spent in college, like it would be easily like 12 to 14 hours just being in college and being with your friends. I think that kind of created those close bonds, which with time it still exists.
So after college, was that when you did your first stint in the US?
Yes. So I think this is like in DJ Sangvi, I realized, okay, I have a knack for convincing people and I also enjoyed marketing. So that led me to this whole feeling that, okay, what if I explored this part of it? I actually started with a job in EY in the engineering space. I was doing IT consultancy, did that for a year, kind of realized that, okay, this is great, but it has like a cycle, right? Every year you're just going to restart the same thing, especially in consulting and in your early years. And after a year, I was like, okay, I don't see a significant learning curve for me happening. And also coming from entrepreneurial families, every morning my dad would be like, why are you going to office? Just start something of your own, kind of a vibe in your family. So that motivated me even more that, okay, why not take that leap of faith? Why not start something of mine? So I was wanting to go into marketing, and then I looked at some opportunities and landed on this thing in Harvard. So they had a summer extension school where they basically do marketing management as a course. And then our professor was at that point in time a pretty renowned person. He had written like a few books in marketing and it looked very interesting as a course. And I was like, okay, why not take this, get a kind of feel of what it is. And that landed me to Boston. That is the first place I landed. And was going to be in Massachusetts for some time.
Yeah. Going back to your dad saying entrepreneurship, I think it comes more naturally to Gujaratis. We are like less afraid to take that risk as a people versus some other more risk-averse communities which favor either like the safety of a job or a government job, as in India. The western part of the country, for our listeners, is more, I think, entrepreneurial. Historically, all the trading routes were with like East Africa, Middle East were from the West. And a lot of these communities are seafaring communities as well. Gujarat, Kerala, Goa, all of those. So that's just some more context.
Adding to that, like I actually feel that's true. I feel like coming from more entrepreneurial families, I have myself seen the ups and downs of owning a business or running a business. And I've seen my dad go from whatever X to zero at some point and then come back from it. And you've also seen simultaneously the kind of family support that you get. Your life is not significantly changing while the ups and downs in businesses are happening because you're taken care with just the people around you. And I think they extend that to not just like immediate family, but extended families to give them that kind of support. So I think, the risk-taking ability comes more naturally and you know what the downsides are and they don't look as fearful.
Yeah. Just to follow up on that, I had visited the Tata Nano plant in Gujarat, and we are asking the manager what some of the big challenges were, because you may remember that it was originally going to be in West Bengal and then Gujarat kind of stole. And they said the biggest problem is that people are not afraid to quit from the factory. And when we say, what are you going to do? Where else will you work? It's like, oh, I'll just open a business. So it's ingrained even in the lower socioeconomic strata and not just in the business families and more well-to-do people. So after Harvard, did you stick around in the US? Did you go back?
So during Harvard, I think there was some very interesting eye-opening things that happened. I think that was my first exposure to people beyond Bombay. So that was very unique. I met people from across India and obviously across globe because we had like people from European countries, Australia, everywhere. So it was my first exposure to, a very unique blend of people. I was still figuring out who I am and that kind of helped define that a lot more. Also living by myself, again, I feel like people from Bombay are a little spoiled. You have all your
Yeah.
schooling, most of your education done in the same city. You are so like in your comfort zone
Yeah.
that you don't understand how privileged that is till you like really
Yeah.
step out and
Yeah.
you go through like living in dorms and eating in canteens and stuff like that. Oh my
Yeah.
God, that is very different.
Yeah, that does come more naturally to people from smaller towns. I was at the US consulate in Breach Candy back when it was there, applying for a visa. And your appointment's at 10 o'clock. You leave home at 9:45. You show up. And there's people who've traveled from God knows where. They've booked a hotel for 2 days and they've brought someone with them to hold on to their belongings. And also in India, living with your parents is not a bad thing. It's actually preferred, and it just makes things a lot easier when you have multiple generations in a same house, both from the business support, but also just like my monthly burn rate was my cell phone bill. That's it. And of course, there's many families where the younger generation is supporting towards the running of the household. But I think you and I were in the part where we didn't have to worry about any of those things. That's how I built up enough savings to pay for my own MBA at the London Business School, earning in rupees, spending in pounds. If I was living in a different city, I don't think that would have been possible at all.
Same for me. I could support CMU because of the
Yeah.
amount of savings I had, the
Yeah.
business that
Exactly.
I could take money for myself from.
My savings rate was probably like 75%.
Oh, 100%. I feel like mine was even higher.
Yeah.
Girls, you're kind of paid for in a lot of places.
So after that program was when you started your digital marketing company?
Yes. So in that program, we were doing case studies in our class, and we were not talking about the biggest brands, but we were talking about like locally run businesses around our campus and how they were leveraging social media and digital marketing back in time. I'm talking about like 2015. And it was very eye-opening because back in India, it was still amongst only top brands who were really using it and leveraging it. So I did see that as a big gap. And because I've known a lot of small, medium-sized businesses back home, I thought, okay, this can really add value. And that got me to the whole idea that, okay, why not open something like this and help brands in India when I come back with this digital marketing kind of support.
We'll go into a short break right now. And when we come back, we'll talk about your experience running this business, the challenges that you face in India, how different they are from challenges here, and then also your experience of running it remotely. So we'll be right back after these messages.
When you're diagnosed with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, you just want to feel better. Steroids help get my symptoms under control, but they come with problems and long-term risks. I need to look out for my future health. The Crohn's and Colitis Foundation changed everything. They encouraged me to take action and even helped me find a specialist. We now have a plan that works for today and tomorrow. Don't put off finding an answer. Spill your guts. Learn more at spillyourguts.org.
Are you ready to discover remarkable stories of resilience and cultural connection? This is Diaspora, a show sharing the journeys of first-generation immigrants from the Indian subcontinent now building their lives in North America. Inspiring, insightful, and always engaging, Diaspora offers a unique perspective on the immigrant experience. Join me, Aditya Mehta, my guests, on the Diaspora Show every Wednesday at 2 p.m. right here on KKNW.
Tell your friends about Alternative Talk 1150.
Welcome back to Diaspora on KKNW, where we share interesting stories of first-generation immigrants from the Indian subcontinent. We are talking to Hiloni Sheth, an entrepreneur and currently a product manager. So before the break, we were talking about you setting up your digital marketing company in India. And I would suppose it would be slightly easier for you than an average person starting a company, A, because you're from a business family, and B, because you came in armed with all this knowledge from Harvard. What were the biggest challenges you faced that you did not anticipate?
Oh, good question. I think definitely I felt confident that I had that support and backing, and it didn't feel alone in the journey just because you have like business families. It feels you're doing it together. But something I wasn't ready for, and this is the most evolved, I think, let's say very like 10 years ago, kind of a timeline. But I did see some sort of discrimination. I would not say real discrimination, but the gender-based differences that you see when you're like in a meeting with a bunch of execs, and unfortunately the team is all males and maybe twice your age. And those were like times when, one, I think mentally you felt intimidated because you've never been in such settings. And then second, yes, it puts you in a self-doubt as to like, how are they going to really perceive you? Are they going to take the time to hear you out? And then lastly, negotiate with someone like you on a table and really talk about numbers. So those were some things that I did face as challenges. And I think as every leadership is, I think people skills and people management. And when you're like young leaders, you have that energy and the drive in you where you want like everyone around you to have that same kind of energy. And you learn a lot about people management and even yourself, and you make mistakes, and that's part and parcel. And I did that. I did a ton of mistakes of kind of expectations you set, kind of processes you set, even like lack of processes to an extent. Like I feel like my backgrounds were more traditional businesses that I'd learned from. And then I had EY where I'd learned some best practices, but to really apply them, that was hard. So yeah, it was all about like, how do you make sense of things while you're building and running? It's like building your plane, flying it, and there's a chance you're falling in between and then going up again.
To use a plane analogy, I think I overcompensated on the process part. When I started my social media company, I had jumbo jet engines on a Gulfstream. So in process terms, it was so robust, but I had 3 employees. And those learnings have been very useful in my current business, where I know what to spend time on processizing at every stage and what things to just wing at any particular stage. So for me, the challenge was getting money out of people. We are a high context culture, which means A, people are okay with uncertainty. B, there's power distance. So the vendor is here, but the boss is there, or the client is there. So the vendors are always looked down on in some sense. And when you moved here, you were still running that company. Did your point of view about this receivables follow-ups change when you came here?
Oh my God. I so relate to this. Definitely it changed significantly. And this actually happened back when I was there. I think down the line after 4 years, I started expanding to international clients. So I had clients across like Singapore, UAE, Europe, and even US. I realized how easy it was to deal with these clients. Your money would come in even before you started the work for that month. Unlike back in India where it would run at a 3-month lag. And I feel like
months is pretty good.
Yeah, I think I was relatively strong on my follow-up, but it took time out of the business owner to really call the other business owner and follow up, which is something I didn't account for as someone running an organization. Like you want to do like more impactful stuff, then follow up for receivables, but that's something that ended up becoming part of my role. So yeah, that was big. I feel like the whole way it's set up there, it's like you said, there's a gap between the power equation and that significantly.
Clients from abroad also have their challenges, their expectations. They have very low uncertainty avoidance, for example. So when their social media specialist would say, oh yeah, we'll get it done at some point, those clients may not, they want very precise answers. But I would take that challenge any day versus having to follow up about money. When I came here, I started working at Amazon at some point, and then I was like, I'm having to do all this to get $500 out of someone. In India, that $500 goes a longer way, so it mattered more. But here I was like, yeah, it's not worth my time. And I think that was one big reason I decided to not do the business in India anymore. The scale and the opportunities are definitely there, but I think you need to be a certain temperament to succeed in India. And if you are, you can do very well, even now, especially now. But at least for me, I don't think I had the temperament. I deal with clients here much better. Also because I came here when I was 17. So I've picked up a lot more American habits than the average person who comes here for a master's degree, for example. So yeah. What was the experience like running the business remotely, apart from the receivable stuff, but just managing your team, getting work out of people?
I think let me start with what happened back then. So I think running my own company, I think it was most like it started with me to like building a team of almost 60 and expanding into different clients, different types of companies that we worked with. That was pretty challenging. I dabbled into a lot of technology. I think back then augmented reality was something that came in. And luckily I was very much on forefront of technology just because of my engineering background. I leveraged a ton of that, which gave me like exposure to understanding how you can scale business with tech. This was also one of those big decisions for me, like when I was growing and like transitioning out of my entrepreneurship to product management. I think one of the realizations I had was growing with people in a service-based business versus growing with technology in a product-based business, I think I'll choose the latter because it gives you a lot more liberty and scalability both. And that's what I learned. Like at some point, you are that single point of failure in a service-based company unless you have equally reliable people that you're putting across to your clients. So I think that became hard. I think when I started becoming remote, I think the one biggest challenge was, I think, people, to an extent that people don't realize how different it is when it comes to work relationships back in India to in the US. I feel in India, they are an extension of your family. You know their birthdays, you know their families, you know them like at a deeper level. And at that point, when I started seeing that me being international led to some of my early people that I'd built web shakers with were looking out for like different opportunities. It gave me that sense that, okay, leadership and emotional experiences are so intertwined, or at least for me, they were. And that was pretty hard, like to see that changing and not having enough control over it. Because again, I was very much the opposite side. I don't have a lot of processes, but I was more like, oh, let's do a gut check here. And only where there's a process needed, you put something in. So that was definitely one of the hard parts. And also my shift happened in the pandemic. So at that point, my company was running pretty well. Like at some point, I'd convinced my husband that you move back because it's doing well. And he was almost there. And then pandemic hit. And I was like, okay, world's going remote. And now I have a chance to just live in another country again before I go back to the way I thought about it. And that opened up eyes. I think the other trade-off is the dollar amount that you said, the amount of time, effort that you put and the reward that you get out of it versus doing something here. That kind of has a very big shift as well. Like you put 12 hours and like real brain work, and your rewards when it comes to INR is not significantly comparable to the kind of expense you have in the US.
Yeah, so one is the difference in the exchange rate and purchasing power. One is also that culturally in India, nobody values your time.
Yes.
So if I say I need to get paid for my time or expertise at that small business level, at least, maybe it's different with big corporates, but people will be, so for example, when I go to meet a client, they'll say, come in the second half of the day. And it's not like come at 4 o'clock or between 2 and 4 p.m. At some point, and then when I'm free, I'll see you, and you have to sit outside. And if you ended up wasting 2 hours, too bad. So that's another thing. But also the effort result correlation is stronger, not just in dollar amount, but in terms of how much of your time is spent in non-productive activities is much higher there. So in Bombay, if I would do 2 meetings a day, that was a great day because it takes so long to get anywhere. But here, I can do 5 meetings in a day. And sure, part of it is the whole remote and post-pandemic. But in general, it's much more efficient here. You're not wasting your time in so much compliance. I think we had more government agencies we were dealing with than we had employees.
All that support things that you have to do to just run your business, they take up so much of your time. Something interesting I'd read recently was in India, you are paid a monthly salary. So it's very hard for people to really understand what their cost per hour is.
Sure.
Versus here, like any person in a given time would understand what their cost per hour is. So the value of time is so much more. So even like in a company like Match Group that we work on right now, when we look at different geographies like India, we know people are more likely to spend their time looking at ads versus even like paying for a subscription. So our models relatively change for those geographies because that's how people are designed.
Interesting. Very interesting. For me, it was a pleasant surprise that people are willing to compensate me for my time. In my current property management business, clients will say, oh yeah, you did this is outside the scope. So fine, if you have to bill me, you have to bill me, and that's okay. And another thing is, on that note, people here understand that you are in a business to make a profit, and it's acceptable to make a profit and to have a profit margin. Whereas there, I felt it was always like, how much can I squeeze the vendor? And it's not a win-win approach for the most part, where if you do well, you will be a happy vendor and you'll do better for me. That kind of equation doesn't exist in India. So even if your business shuts down, I don't care. I still want the lowest price.
They kind of want to reach out the best that they can, but it doesn't matter at what cost. And weirdly, I've seen this not just like at small businesses or medium-sized businesses, but even like in big corporates. Like those negotiation meetings are hard. Like I remember this was one of my experiences. It was one of the biggest event agencies, biggest event companies in India. And I was their client, and this was my early days. And I had to go into a negotiation meeting for the contract with the owner of the company. And he had been known for like 25 years as one of the best sales guys that exist in India, kind of a thing. And I was already intimidated. I go into that room and just that confidence that you have to hold ground to the numbers you want to keep and negotiate as to why that is important and bring them on the same page in the language they understand. Oh my God, that was wrecking. I luckily survived that, got a really good contract. But after coming out, it was like, God, I don't know how I did that.
Yeah. My pricing strategy class at London Business School was very helpful. So I had almost 80% of my clients prepaid every month. It was the other 20% that drove me crazy. But what we did is we had a higher price than our usual price, and that was the postpaid price. And then our actual price was the prepaid price. So if you pay me on the first, then you get this rate. And if you want to pay at the end of the month or for 30 days, 40, because the contracts are not enforceable given the slow legal system. So if I say you have to pay me interest on a late payment, that doesn't mean anything at all. So we did that after I did that course and managed eventually to get 80% of clients to sign up for that, which was a big peace of mind, honestly.
Yeah. But I think it works two ways in India, right? You also look at the size of the client and you define some of your pricing strategy. It's not like apples to apples for every client.
Yeah. If you have a very large corporate, they're not going to go for the prepaid option. They'll say, we'll pay you when we'll pay you, as per our payment cycle. One of my clients was Neel Kamal Plastics. We did SEO for them. And they're like, yeah, we don't care for the 6,000 rupees savings a month, but our accounting team will process the invoice on the 18th, and that's when it's going to get done. No matter how much you scream and nobody who you call, that's where it's going to be.
I had pharma clients and real estate clients. Like real estate had like a 2-month kind of latency.
Yeah.
Pharma had a 3-month, but you had to deal with it. But obviously they were big contracts, so it was worth the wait.
My first company did among other things, did real estate brokerage. And we ran out of operating capital because we thought it'll take 6 months to get our brokerage. It took on average 17 months. So when you moved here and you were running your company, did you have a CEO there or a CEO? And I think at some point your sister was also involved with the business.
Yes. So I eventually started building a contingency plans. And I think 6 months in being here, I realized that is not sustainable. The 3 a.m. meetings and taking random client calls. What's it worth? And is it even worth doing at this point in time? So that kind of put me in that zone that, okay, I need to build a contingency there. And ended up doing that, like eventually built my sister. She had started as an intern 5 years ago in my company. And she was now at that stage where she was ready to take up opportunities and kind of trained her into it. And then she took over. So that gave me a sense of like, it's a baby I had built over years and it still exists and it's in like sound hands. So that was a good feeling to transition out of it.
Yeah. And your sister is younger than you.
Yes, she is 5 years younger than me.
Okay, so there was a decent age gap that you could boss her around as, the intern.
The first year took a toll on our relationship a little bit because it's like fine line between, hey, are you talking as a sister or the CEO of Web Shakers today? And how the conversation's gonna go. But luckily it turned out well. And I think it was a good thing for her as well. She enjoyed the space and it gave her like that time to learn and get onto the harder thing and then eventually go her own way.
I started on the ground floor in my parents' business. I used to do door-to-door mutual fund sales. And I think that was the right decision because you need to know the whole org in and out before you are in a position to lead any of it. So at what point did you decide to go to Carnegie Mellon and what drove that decision?
So this was, I think, very much, I spoke about the technology part and I wanted to kind of figure out ways to scale with it. But what I also did is just part of me loves like learning. And I was like, okay, let's experiment. I built one of my clients and Web Shakers was like a jewelry brand based out of New York, fine jewelry brand. And the client was also just looking at expanding their business. They were more into B2B and they wanted to start a B2C. And I was like, okay, let me like test my product realm here. And just because of doing marketing, you get so much customer insights that you can feed into your product that they are helpful. And I'd seen that working for my clients back when I was doing marketing. So I was like, okay, let me run this as testing grounds. I worked with that brand File Color Jewels, built their entire website, their digital presence, got them up and running on Amazon and all the marketplaces. And I saw it like grow pretty successfully. So at that point, I had a little bit of confidence that, okay, I know how to do this. But then the part of me was like, okay, let's formally get to know this exactly like how it works in like other industries. And that got me into thinking, okay, I'm going to pursue like an MBA or something and I'll start prepping for it. And in that realm, I started applying and came across this really amazing course at Carnegie Mellon. It was more product management centric grad school program. So it was like in the Tepper School of Business, but it was a separate product management program. So it was very unique and 1 year. I think I was also, as any immigrant, was optimizing what's the best ROI. So it was a 1 year course. It had an internship, so had an opportunity to earn money in the internship, and it was giving out like really good jobs. Like you were basically on the same landscape as a MBA grad when you were in the job market. So it made a lot of sense. And I was like, okay, let's just do it. And it happened in that weird time when I'd moved to Seattle. It was 4 months in. I bought the last piece of furniture in my house to set it up. And I got my admit. And then I'm like telling my husband we have to sell everything in 2 months and move to Pittsburgh and we're going to be there. So that was a funny timing.
Yeah. And I think he's always been very supportive of whatever you do from what I know of you guys. So he moved with you and you both were in Pittsburgh for the whole year.
I think he was super nice to move from leaving amazing Seattle and moving to Pittsburgh. And when I moved there is when I learned apparently Pittsburgh has one extra gloomy day than Seattle. So it's even more gloomier than this could be.
I didn't know that was possible. Yeah, I mean, Prachi loved everything about her life. So Prachi is my wife. And I've pretty much dragged her to Canada. So I always appreciate that she did that for me and stepped out of what was very comfortable life, great career. She was due for a promotion and we just showed up and not knowing a single person. So it's good that you appreciate that as well, like I do for my spouse.
Oh, totally. I think it's a together journey. I think you can't do so many things by yourself.
Yeah. On that note, let's take a short break. And when we come back, we'll talk to Hiloni about the podcast that she used to have, and also her journey spending a little bit of time in a lot of different cities before settling in Seattle. So we'll be back after these messages.
Over the years, you've brought them into your home. You were prescribed opioids after the C-section and after Dad's back injury. They helped when you were in pain, and you held on to them just in case. But did you know holding on to unused opioids puts your family at risk? Trouble with opioids can start at home with unused medicines such as pills, patches, and syrups. You can remove the risk and protect your family. Find out how at www.fda.gov/drug disposal.
Hello, I'm Chris Erdman. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW, I sit down with inspiring entrepreneurs, creative minds, and game changers to uncover the real stories behind their business. On my show, Made of More, we explore the challenges that they've overcome, the breakthroughs that they've celebrated, and the mindset that drives them forward. If you're ready to unlock your full entrepreneurial potential, Made of More is the show for you, because here we know you are made of more. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW.
Alternative Talk 1150, the talk of the sound.
Welcome back to Diaspora on KKNW, where we share interesting stories of first-generation immigrants from South Asia. We're talking to Hiloni Sheth, my friend and fellow digital marketing entrepreneur. So before the break, we talked about your running a business remotely from here. We talked about those nuances and the Carnegie Mellon degree. During COVID, you had a podcast of your own. So tell me more about, was baking your own sourdough bread not interesting enough, or what got you to do that, and what was the podcast about?
Oh, yeah. Those were fun times. I think pandemic was the time where you did everything beyond your day-to-day and gave you like a big chance to explore those things. This was back in time, I think a bunch of friends, I think everyone started like being more in touch digitally.
Yeah.
And I had this really close friend who had moved to like the US, and then I had another very close friend who had moved to London. And we would just like set up like just calls randomly, and our conversations used to be like really interesting. And at some point we were like, okay, why don't we just like record this or do a podcast? That got to us and we were like, okay, let's just try it and build something around it. Then what kind of next hit us is all of us wanted to be in touch with our friends, which we probably, this is 5 years down into your career. So you were not in touch with almost all your friends from grad school, and everyone was doing very unique things after engineering. So our idea was, okay, let's talk to folks who have done engineering but are pursuing interesting careers now. And be that kind of a space where anyone who's now getting into engineering or deciding on their career has like more perspectives on what they could think of. So that kind of led us to just gathering our friends, talking to them as trying to understand more about their work, the culture changes. They were globally present and it was very unique. I think the most interesting part I loved about it is just one, being able to talk to them again and be in touch. Second, learn their unique insights that came from the things they pursued which were not the norm, and the way they tackled hardships and got out of it. So that was very entertaining. And I think third, pandemic, you just wanted something to do and then find a sense of purpose. So that helped.
I was laid off and locked down, and my family was stuck in India for what eventually would be 5 months. So I set up my fourth startup at that time. So I shouldn't be talking about sourdough bread because I went and just created a new company altogether. That's where this Diaspora podcast also eventually came from, right? From that network for new immigrants.
Oh, that was for me as well. Like in the middle of the pandemic, this is like early June. March is when it started.
Yeah.
June is when I think we were almost in 6-month long distance marriage.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was like, okay, I have it. I want to be where he is now. And I took one of those emergency flights that they had scheduled from like India to US. And I was wearing PPE kits and like traveling on a 24-hour journey. Oh my God, that was very interesting, very unique.
That's how my wife came with my, then at that time Arjun was 7 months old. One of those Air India Vande Bharat mission flights. I think they were supposed to be to rescue Indians outside India, but they were just used as much by Indians trying to leave India, the ones who lived in other places.
I remember meeting her, and the weird part was back in India, we were like so logged into our buildings and like our apartment setups, and we were not allowed to step out. And the next moment I land in DC, that's where we were living, Virginia, Arlington. And I land there and I start seeing people eating out in restaurants during pandemic. I was like, am I in a different world now? Like where I was like so restricted to now I don't see the same restrictions. It was very weird.
I think part of it was the general attitude about COVID in the US, but also there's far fewer people here. So in British Columbia, where I was stuck during lockdown, you could go out for a walk. Even at the height of the pandemic, you could take your dog out for a walk. But that's because it's just 2 million people in the city. If you try to do that in India, everything would be a super spreader event, just given the number of people. So then what got you interested in living in all these different cities? And tell me more about how that came about, and then go into what cities you actually lived in.
Okay. So this kind of started building up when I was graduating. We were in Pittsburgh. And obviously the discussion was where next do we go and live? And luckily at that time, like, my husband's job was remote, and the job that I got with Match Group as well was remote. So it was our time to decide, okay, where next? And we did this thing where we started like asking our friends, no questions asked, which city would you want to live in the US? And everyone would have like really unique, fun cities. But then we would ask them like, why don't you move there? And they would have like basic reasons like job or something like that. And both of us were like, okay, we are currently figuring that out. We have the liberty of like remote jobs. Why not maximize this and actually live in some of these cities and just see what's in it for us? So we started our journey. I think weather was a big component. So the first city I wanted to be in, away from the Pittsburgh, like cold, was to go somewhere warm. So we started with San Diego, and I love that city. And probably that's the place I would want to be in. No constraints. But yeah, it's a little laid back for like current day and age for me, but love that place. From there, we started doing like a bunch of cities. We did Virginia again because we really loved it, but we were like, okay, let's give it one more try. We moved to Colorado. We also did Utah, which was when my parents were visiting and we were taking them around. So we did 2 weeks in Utah out of nowhere. And
Like
it was
Salt
beautiful.
Lake City?
Yeah, Salt Lake City. It was beautiful.
I actually remember having a conversation with Prerak and suggesting Boise.
Yes.
And he was like, yeah, we're actually planning to go there.
Yes. And from there, we moved to San Francisco. Then we stayed there for a few months. We also in the middle did Texas because my company was based out of Dallas. It was an opportunity that, okay, let's consider if Texas is for us. So we did like Dallas for some weeks, Houston for a few weeks, and Austin for a month. I think we spoke back when we were in Austin as well. I loved the city. Beautiful place. So we did that. And then eventually after like San Francisco, landed to Seattle. We were going to then go to Vancouver next. I think that was on our plan. And then somehow the city just made us stay. But doing all of this travel, I think we learned a lot. I think the unique part we learned is any place can become home in 2 days, which is weird. But like the second we started moving our stuff into the new Airbnb and we travel with 2 bags, in 2 days it would just start feeling home. And this is what our routine is and this is what our space is, which was very nice. But we learned that both of us were very, I think one, community was a big aspect for us, like people and people we know. Second, I think outdoorsy. Both of us love like doing hiking and like water activities and things like those. So that played an important role in where we wanted to be. And I think third was food. Just like any desi person, it's a very big component of our life, and having access to good, decent food. And I think the biggest factor between San Francisco and Seattle, because those were the two competing ones for us, I think it came down to cost of living and proximity to people. See, San Francisco is great, but obviously cost of living is exorbitantly high and people are very spread out. You don't have access to everyone because anyone's like in a downtown San Francisco to San Jose and they might not meet each other for like months. Versus in Seattle, at least I've seen, even if it's in the east side or west side, people are much more willing to commute. The commute is not crazy bad. And that makes it pretty good. Like you had accessibility to all your friends and you would meet up on weekends. So that played a big role in Seattle. And oh my God, Pacific Northwest is gorgeous.
Yeah, I think I was like an American in my previous life because I'm always drawn to the US, but specifically this lower mainland of British Columbia / PNW. It's just a fantastic part of the world to live in. There's no real natural disaster threats. Resources are plentiful. It's pretty educated population, multicultural, globally connected. Cost of living is high compared to like a Salt Lake City. I think you're getting something in return for that extra cost of living. I did consider moving to Austin when I was trying to move to the US, but I decided not to. One, because I had a college student view of the city and I wanted to preserve that novelty and nostalgia. And also it is a city better for younger people. It's not like, I think Seattle, or at least the suburbs of Seattle, are very nice for people with young families. Like Issaquah, where I live in right now, I think it's like smack perfect for my life stage right now. So that's pretty cool that you were able to do all of this. If not Seattle, San Diego is probably your second choice. I visited there for the first time very recently and I was like blown away by the city. It's so pretty. The weather's always good. I would like to go back there again, especially for Legoland.
Oh yeah. I love that city. I think the weather, the sense of people, and I think it just felt like people were kinder. I think the more relaxed people are, or maybe like more spiritually connected to an extent, they felt like very relaxed and kinder. And yeah, the city is beautiful. It has a lot to offer.
Better Mexican food for sure.
Oh my God, so much better.
Once you've lived in California or Texas, most other states in the US will be a disappointment.
Yeah, especially for Mexican food, 100%.
Nice. Okay, let's talk about what you do currently. First question is, how is it like going back to being an employee after having run, and 60 employees is a very sizable business in any part of the world. So how has that been, and how has the entrepreneurial experience helped you and hindered you? Because for me at Amazon, it helped and hindered both.
I think from a help perspective, the role that I'm in product management, like we are a liaison between engineering, design, analytics, marketing, all of these teams. So it's a very high accountability place. And you have a lot of ownership over what you do and what you drive.
Yeah.
So with the entrepreneurial experience, that was something that came naturally. Also very similar to entrepreneurship, every day you are helping navigate someone in a direction and you're helping someone like make that next decision, which was very similar to what your day-to-day problem as an entrepreneur would be. So that was very helpful. I think the cons are, I think it's not very easy to have that zoom in, zoom out experience just because of the amount of knowledge or information you have access to at a given point in time about something. That was something I really enjoyed as an entrepreneur because you could like quickly zoom out and really look at that lens and see, okay, how it's going to help a business XYZ versus here it's a little hard to do that just because of the nuances and things you have access to. I think additionally, cons could be you sometimes just want to like do everything because you're so used to doing it, and it might feel like encroaching for someone else doing that work, and as like, why are you being nosy and why are you kind of coming in there? So that is hard. That was an unlearning I had to do when I transitioned into this role.
My problem was I was too straightforward for my own good because as an entrepreneur you're used to being that. You're not used to having to navigate office relationships, office politics, any of that. So I had being family business, then own business. When I was in Amazon, I had no skill set of understanding those nuances and reacting appropriately to them. As an entrepreneur, you're generally less insecure about things because you've faced greater risks. So you're not going to change yourself to hold on to your job or pander to a certain group of people. And that, I think, bit me a lot. But it also validated that I'm not cut out for corporate life. There's no right or wrong about it, and makes me do what I do right now with more conviction.
At an entrepreneurship level, I feel like your reputation is more externally driven, like with your clients, less internally. Versus as an employee, your reputation has a lot more worth internally, and you have to really navigate how that is.
Yeah, that's a very nice way to look at it. So you are not an economic migrant. You don't have the conventional path where you came here for your master's degree and better life, more income, etc., and sending money back home. You don't have that situation. What advice would you give someone who is in that regular path on how they can make more of their US experience? I'll tell you where I'm coming from, because I feel a lot of the people who come for that reason, they're so focused on working hard and setting up their life, which is great, which you should do. I feel like sometimes they miss out on the assimilation and the benefits of that assimilation. I know people who've been here for 20 years, they've never been out on the lake. And the lake may not be for everyone, but it's worth experiencing once, because you're in a place where you can do that. Like in India, you may not necessarily have access to outdoors. So how can someone who has followed a convention path have the same lens that you do as someone who's not an economic migrant and benefit from it?
I think firstly, yes, grateful and privileged. That's not the path I had to choose. I think for someone who's just recently moved, one key advice I would probably give them is to give yourself some grace. And this is something that I faced, like moving a little late in life here, because now you're at that point in time where you've proved yourself somewhere and you're in that eagerness to prove yourself in the new land. And it comes from you wanting results sooner than really putting in time. And also, like, people around you or your friends are in a different space and different time in their life, and they've figured it out, and you're like restarting. So it's important to have that compassion for yourself, give yourself some grace. Also, don't consider going into comparison versus channeling it with curiosity as to why is it happening certain way. Had gone through that phase as well and cycled out of it. And the second it became more curiosity, you really have a very different lens as to why people are doing something and doing it a certain way. And I think that comes to the economic piece as well, like beyond your 9 to 5. And the good part here is you have so much control over your time, unlike back in India, that you have that additional time to start explore yourself and your journey. Another, because of our high contextual society we are in, a lot of you is designed as what your society around you is. And when you detach yourself and move here, you now have a chance to restart and rethink all those aspects of your life. I remember as something as small as a vegetable I used to love growing up, when I had to come back and decide and make it for like, what am I going to cook for myself? That wasn't on the list because I ate it as a function of everything around me, not as much as I really loved it as much.
Everything about your life is of your choosing, where you live, who you spend time with, and whatnot. If I felt exactly that when I went to Vancouver, and I wasn't expecting to feel that, and I felt like the world's wide open. I can be a different person. She wasn't too happy about it, but yeah. So let's go into our weekly segment. Can we spin the wheel, please? So this one is called Sounds and Smells. Do you have any sounds or smells, good or bad, that instantly take you back or you get a flashback of home?
Oh, okay. I think from a smell perspective, and this is very Mumbaikar, but the smell of that first rain and that mitti. We call it mitti because that's the real essence you feel, and that smell of the city when you don't have to commute and go to work and stuff like that, but allowed to like just sit and relax back on that day. And then the chai and the pakora to combine with that whole experience.
Kishore Kumar songs.
That wasn't my case, but yes, that could be the combination. But oh my God, that reminds me of home.
So the first monsoon shower in June, the smell of the dirt after that, and then the sky is blue for the next day, and then suddenly it goes back to hot and whatever, right? Okay, that kind of brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you for listening to Diaspora. We hope you enjoyed hearing Hiloni's interesting story. Remember to check out our show notes for links and more information about the topics discussed in today's episode. You can find Diaspora on all major podcast platforms and can subscribe to our channel on YouTube. If you like this episode, consider following us on Instagram or leaving us a 5-star review. Diaspora is part of the Staying Power network of shows and podcasts, all of which are dedicated to inspiring listeners to build lives of meaning, connection, and value. You can find the Staying Power network of shows wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back next week with another interesting story from the South Asian diaspora. Until then, take care and stay curious. And Hiloni, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you. This was fun.